At family dinner, my niece sneered, "We don't sit with your kind." They all laughed. What they didn't know? I own every property they live in. What happened next was beautiful. Hey, Reddit. My brother's family treated my wife like garbage at a family dinner because of where she's from. Called us those people right to our faces while the whole family nodded along. They had no idea I owned the houses they're all living in. By dessert, I'd made some calls. By Monday morning, their world was burning. Here's how it went down. I'm Jake, 34 male, and I've spent the last decade building a real estate portfolio in the Midwest. Started with one foreclosure property when I was 24, fixed it up myself, rented it out, and kept reinvesting. Nothing fancy or dramatic, just consistent work, smart purchases during the 2012 housing crash, and a lot of patience while everyone else was buying new trucks and taking vacations. The first property was a disaster when I bought it. Bank foreclosure that had been sitting empty for 8 months, vandalized twice, and had a roof leak that destroyed half the ceiling. Most people took one look and walked away. I saw opportunity, spent 6 months doing the work myself, tearing out ruined drywall, replacing the roof, updating the electrical, refinishing the hardwood floors that were hidden under disgusting carpet. Learned everything from YouTube videos and advice from guys at the hardware store. Made plenty of mistakes. Once wired an outlet backward and nearly started a fire. Another time installed a toilet that leaked for 3 days before I figured out what I'd done wrong. But every mistake taught me something. And by the time I finished, that house looked better than half the neighborhood. Rented it out for $850 a month, which seemed like a fortune at the time. Used that rental income, plus my day job salary to save for the next property. Lived in a studio apartment that cost $400 a month, drove a 15-year-old sedan, ate a lot of rice and chicken. My coworkers thought I was weird for not upgrading my lifestyle, but I had a plan. The 2012 crash was when everything changed. Banks were desperate to unload foreclosed properties. I'd saved about $40,000 by then, and suddenly that bought a lot more than it would have a few years earlier. Picked up 3 properties in 18 months, all foreclosures, all needing work. Spent every weekend and evening fixing them up, learning plumbing and HVAC and basic carpentry. By the time I was 30, I owned 10 properties. By 32, I'd hit 15. Now, at 34, I've got 18 properties generating about $24,000 monthly in total rent. After mortgages, insurance, taxes, maintenance, and unexpected repairs, I clear roughly $8,500 a month in passive income. Combined with my day job managing logistics for a manufacturing company, I'm doing better than fine. Now I own 18 rental properties across 3 counties. Mix of single-family homes, a few duplexes, and 1 small apartment building. Total value around $3.2 million with about $1.1 million in equity after mortgages. Not rich by any means, but comfortable enough that I don't worry about bills and can take my wife out for a nice dinner without checking my bank account first. The work isn't glamorous. Dealing with broken water heaters at 2 a.m., tenants who think rent is optional, city inspectors who get excited about finding code violations from 1987. But it's mine. I built it, and it pays the bills while giving me freedom. Most people working regular jobs will never have. My wife Sophie is originally from the Philippines. Met her 6 years ago through a mutual friend at a community event, one of those volunteer things where you spend a Saturday painting a community center. She was up on a ladder cutting in edges along the ceiling with the steadiest hand I'd ever seen, making jokes with the other volunteers while doing precision work that would have taken me 3 times as long. We started talking during lunch break. She was funny, smart, and had this way of calling out nonsense without being mean about it. When someone complained about having to be there on a Saturday, she just smiled and said, "Well, nobody forced you to volunteer for voluntary work." The guy shut up immediately. I asked her out that same day. We went for coffee, talked for 4 hours, and I knew pretty quickly she was different from anyone I dated before. She had goals, work ethic, and zero tolerance for drama. She'd tell you exactly what she thought, but she'd do it in a way that somehow didn't make you feel attacked. That's a rare skill. She's a registered nurse at County General, works night shifts in the ICU handling the critical cases that most people couldn't handle mentally or emotionally. I've heard her stories. Coding patients at 3 a.m., dealing with families who think screaming at medical staff will somehow cure their relatives faster, making split-second decisions that determine whether someone lives or dies. The woman has more patience and grace under pressure than anyone I've ever met. We got married 3 years ago. Small ceremony at a park pavilion, maybe 50 people total. Her family flew in from Manila. Parents, 2 siblings, an aunt, and 3 cousins. They were warm, welcoming, Treated me like family from day one, despite barely knowing me. Her dad pulled me aside at the reception and said, "You take care of my daughter, and we'll get along fine." Simple, direct, no drama. My family showed up but made it weird by asking pointed questions about green cards and work visas during the reception. My aunt actually asked Sophie, in front of everyone, how long she'd been in our country and whether she was here legally. Sophie handled it with more class than they deserved, smiling and patiently explaining she'd been a citizen for years. Meanwhile, I was calculating how much force I could use to physically remove my aunt from the venue without creating a scene. The worst part was my mom pulling me aside before the ceremony and asking if I was sure about this. Not in a supportive mother worried about her son way. In a, "Are you sure you want to marry one of them" way. She didn't say it directly, but the implication was clear enough that Sophie noticed too. My brother Calvin is 3 years older, works middle management at a manufacturing plant, and has spent his entire adult life convinced he's smarter than everyone else, despite evidence suggesting otherwise. He's got opinions on everything: politics, economics, parenting, proper lawn maintenance, and will share them whether you ask or not. His wife Patricia is cut from the same cloth. Stay-at-home mom who treats it like a professional achievement, constantly posting on social media about the hardest job in the world, while her mother watches the kids 3 days a week. She's got this way of looking down her nose at people who work service jobs, which is ironic considering she was a waitress when Calvin met her. They have 3 kids: Brittany, 16, Austin, 14, and little Emma, 9. Brittany's the one who started this whole mess, but we'll get to that. My parents are what you'd call Midwest traditional, which is code for quietly racist while insisting they're not. They'd never say anything directly offensive, but they ask Sophie where she's really from about twice a year, despite knowing she's from Manila. They compliment her English like it's surprising she can form complete sentences. Dad once told me I was brave for marrying someone from a different culture, like I'd adopted a rescue dog instead of marrying a fully functional adult woman. The family dynamics have always been strained, but manageable. Sunday dinners at my parents' place, awkward small talk, me biting my tongue when someone said something ignorant, then going home and venting to Sophie, who'd just shrug and say she'd dealt with worse at the hospital. Here's what made the situation extra complicated. I own properties that several family members live in. My parents' house? I bought it for them 5 years ago when they were facing foreclosure after Dad's medical bills from his heart surgery piled up. Paid $140,000 cash, put the deed in my name, let them live there rent-free. They think they still own it because I never corrected that assumption. Seemed easier than dealing with the pride issues. Calvin and Patricia's place? I bought it as an investment property in 2019, a nice 4-bedroom in a good school district. They'd been renting from a landlord who was selling, so I bought it and let them stay at the same rent they'd been paying, $1,400 a month for a house that should rent for $2,200. Family discount, you know? They have no idea I'm their landlord. Their rent checks go to a property management company I use, so they just think they got lucky with a reasonable landlord who never raises the rent. My uncle Howard, Dad's brother, and his wife Kelly, they rent a duplex I own on the east side of town. They know I'm the landlord, but I give them the same family rate, $900 a month for a place worth $1,500. Howard's been on disability for years after a workplace accident, so I figured I was helping family out. My cousin Brandon, Calvin's son, technically, but we grew up like brothers, rents a small house from me near the university. He's trying to finish his engineering degree at 29, after dropping out twice. I'd charge him $650 a month for a place that could easily get $1,100. He knows I own it, and he's always been decent about paying on time and keeping the place in good shape. So yeah, I'm essentially subsidizing half my family's housing costs, and most of them don't even know it. I never brought it up because it seemed like it would make things weird, and I didn't need the recognition. Just felt good to help out family members who were struggling. That was before the dinner. Last month, my mom called and said we were doing a big family dinner at her place. Calvin's birthday was coming up, and she wanted everyone together. I almost said no. These things are usually uncomfortable, but Sophie insisted we should go because family's important, and maybe things would be better this time. Spoiler alert, things were not better this time. We showed up at 6 p.m. with a nice bottle of grape juice, for them since we don't drink, and a homemade cake Sophie had spent 3 hours decorating. Chocolate cake with buttercream frosting, piped roses around the edges, "Happy Birthday, Calvin," written in perfect script across the top. The woman went above and beyond, trying to win over people who'd already decided not to like her. I'd watched her in our kitchen that afternoon, carefully measuring ingredients, testing the frosting consistency, redoing one of the roses 3 times because it wasn't perfect enough. When I asked why she was going to so much trouble for people who barely acknowledged her existence, she just shrugged and said, maybe this time would be different. Maybe if she tried hard enough, they'd finally see her as family. I didn't have the heart to tell her I'd lost that hope years ago. The first sign of trouble was when we walked in, and Brittany was sitting in the living room with 2 of her friends. Both blonde, both wearing expensive clothes, both looking us up and down like we were door-to-door salespeople instead of family members. I'd known this was Calvin's birthday dinner. I didn't realize it was also some kind of Sweet 16 planning party for Brittany. "Oh, you're here," Patricia said when she saw us. Like our presence was unexpected despite the specific invitation, with a specific time that Mom had confirmed twice. "We're running a bit behind. Calvin's still getting ready." Behind wasn't the word for it. The party was clearly in full swing. Music playing, food already set out, people laughing and talking. We were just the last people they'd wanted to actually show up. The house looked great, by the way. New furniture in the living room, one of those expensive sectionals from the furniture store that advertises during football games. Fresh paint in the dining room in that trendy gray color everyone's using now. Landscaping outside, that must have cost a few thousand. Professional flower beds, new shrubs, decorative rocks arranged in patterns that screamed, "We hired someone." All funded by below-market rent on a house I owned. But who's counting? I'd bought that house as an investment property in 2019 for $185,000. Put $40,000 down, rented it to them for $1,400 a month when comparable places in that school district were going for $2,200 to $2,400. They'd been there 4 years now, and I'd never raised the rent once. Basically gave them a free $800 to $1,000 every single month while they redecorated with money they saved by not paying market rate. Sophie offered to help in the kitchen, but Patricia waved her off with this fake smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Oh no, we have everything under control. Why don't you just wait in the living room?" Translation: we don't need help from you people. So we sat on the new sectional in the living room, while Brittany and her friends giggled and whispered across from us. I could hear fragments of their conversation, even though they were pretending to be subtle. "Is that his wife? She looks so young. I heard she's not even from here. My mom says she probably just wanted a green card." Sophie heard it too. She just smiled and scrolled through her phone, pretending not to notice. The woman has dealt with worse in hospital waiting rooms. Families who refuse to let her touch their sick relatives because of how she looks. Patients who demand American nurses. Doctors who assume she's a medical assistant instead of an RN with 10 years of experience. But I could see the tension in her shoulders. The way she was breathing just a little too carefully. The tight smile that meant she was swallowing something she wanted to say. I reached over and squeezed her hand. She squeezed back but didn't look up from her phone. After about 20 minutes of uncomfortable sitting while the party continued around us like we were invisible, Patricia finally announced dinner was ready. Everyone started moving toward the dining room, and that's when I saw the setup. When it was finally time to eat, Patricia had set up a beautiful dining room table. Looked like something from a magazine spread or one of those home decorating shows Sophie watches. Good china, the kind with gold trim that you only use for special occasions. Cloth napkins folded into shapes that probably had names. Centerpiece with fresh flowers that definitely came from an actual florist, not the grocery store. She'd gone all out. There were name cards at each seat, fancy calligraphy name cards in little silver holders. Everyone else was at the main dining table. Mom and Dad at the heads, Calvin and Patricia in the places of honor as birthday boy and hostess. Austin and Emma on one side, Uncle Howard and Aunt Kelly across from them. Brandon next to some of Patricia's relatives I'd never met. Some of Brittany's friends were even seated at the main table. Probably 15 people total, all seated in the formal dining room with the good china and the flowers and the cloth napkins. Sophie and I had name cards too, at a small folding table, the kind you get at a hardware store for $10. In the hallway, next to the coat closet and the bathroom. Close enough to hear the conversation, but far enough away to make it clear we weren't part of it. I stood there staring at this setup thinking I'd misunderstood something. Maybe the main table was genuinely full and this was the overflow seating? But no, there were 2 empty chairs at the main table, one on each side. And the folding table was clearly set up as an afterthought. One of those plastic numbers with the metal legs that wobbled on uneven ground. "What's this?" I asked Patricia, my voice level. "Oh, we ran out of room at the big table," she said breezily, not making eye contact. "But don't worry, you'll still be able to hear all the conversation. We didn't want you to feel left out," while literally leaving us out. Sophie touched my arm gently. "It's fine," she said quietly, in that voice she uses when something's very much not fine, but she's trying to keep the peace. Let's just sit. But I was still processing the visual, still trying to make sense of how we'd gone from family members to hallway overflow seating. Everyone else at the nice table with the good china and cloth napkins and fresh flowers. Sophie and I at a plastic folding table with paper plates and plastic forks like we were at a kid's birthday party at a park. My mom was already seated, carefully not looking in our direction. My dad was studying his water glass like it contained the meaning of life. Uncle Howard and Aunt Kelly exchanged uncomfortable glances, but said nothing. They knew something was wrong, but weren't going to risk making waves. Brandon looked genuinely upset, but he was just a kid at this point. No power to change the seating arrangement his aunt had orchestrated. That's when Brittany decided to add her contribution to the evening. We don't really sit with you people anyway, she said, loud enough for everyone to hear. She was looking directly at Sophie when she said it. The room went silent. One of those heavy silences where everyone suddenly becomes very interested in their napkins. I waited for someone to say something, to correct her, to tell a 16-year-old that you don't talk to people like that. Calvin cleared his throat. Brittany, that's not... what she means is... What she means, Patricia jumped in, smiling in a way that didn't reach her eyes, is that the main table is for the core family. You understand. Core family. Sophie and I had been married for 3 years, but apparently that wasn't core enough. My mother was studying her plate like it contained the secrets of the universe. My father was suddenly very focused on cutting his bread roll. Uncle Howard and Aunt Kelly exchanged uncomfortable glances, but said nothing. Only Brandon looked genuinely uncomfortable. That's messed up, he muttered, but not loud enough to really challenge anyone. Sophie squeezed my hand under the table. Let's just eat and go, she whispered. But something in me snapped. Not in a yelling, dramatic way. In a cold, calculated way that probably should have worried me more than it did. I stood up slowly, pulled out my phone, and opened my property management app. Right there at the dinner table, I started making calls. First call was to my property manager, Denise. She picked up on the second ring. Hey, Denise, it's Jake. I need you to start eviction proceedings on 3 properties. Yeah, tonight. I'll send you the addresses in a minute. The table had gone from silent to dead quiet. Everyone was staring now. No, nothing wrong with the properties. I'm just done giving family discounts to people who don't appreciate it. I could see Calvin's face starting to register what was happening. He'd gone pale. Second call was to my real estate attorney, Mitchell. Left a voicemail since it was Sunday evening. Hey, Mitchell. Jake here. Need you to draft some documents for me. I'm transferring ownership of the property at 447 Maple Street back to the bank. Mom and Dad can work out new payment arrangements with them. I'll explain tomorrow. My mother actually gasped. My father's face had gone red. Third call was to my accountant. David, I need you to restructure my portfolio. I'm moving 3 properties to market rate immediately, and I'm selling one. Yeah, I know it's Sunday. I'll double your usual fee for the weekend work. I ended the call and looked around the table. Everyone was frozen like someone had pressed pause on their lives. So here's what's about to happen, I said calmly, looking directly at Calvin. Your rent is going to market rate starting next month. That's $2,200 instead of the $1,400 you've been paying. You'll get official notice tomorrow. Calvin's mouth was opening and closing like a fish. Patricia had gone white. I turned to Uncle Howard. You too. $1,500 a month starting next month. If you can't afford it, you've got 60 days to find somewhere else. Aunt Kelly started crying. Uncle Howard just stared at his plate. And Mom, Dad, the house you think you own? You don't. I own it. I've been letting you live there free because I thought family helped family. But apparently I'm not core family, so I'm transferring the deed back to the bank. You can negotiate your own mortgage with them. Good luck with that on Dad's retirement income. My mother was crying now too. You can't do this. Actually, I can. I own the properties. I can do whatever I want with them. Calvin finally found his voice. This is insane. Over a seating arrangement? No, I said quietly. This is over years of treating my wife like she's not good enough for this family. Over the subtle comments, the assumptions, the looks. Today was just the last straw. I turned to Brittany, who was crying now, probably understanding for the first time that actions have consequences. And you, I said. You just cost your parents about $800 a month, your grandparents their house, and your uncle his affordable rent. Hope that comment felt worth it. Sophie stood up beside me. We're leaving, she said calmly. We walked out, left the cake on their counter, left the grape juice on their table, left them all sitting in shocked silence. In the car, Sophie was quiet for a long time. Finally, she said, You didn't have to do that. Yes, I did. Your family is going to hate you now. They already didn't respect me. At least now they'll think twice before disrespecting you. She smiled a little. That was pretty dramatic. I'm a dramatic guy. No, you're really not. That's what made it so effective. The next morning, I followed through on everything. Denise sent official notices to all 3 properties about rent increases and terms changes. Certified mail, return receipt requested, exactly by the book. Mitchell started the paperwork on transferring my parents' house back to the bank, which involved some complicated legal maneuvering since they'd been living there, assuming they owned it. My accountant David worked overtime restructuring the portfolio exactly like I'd asked, moving properties from family subsidized to market rate categories in his spreadsheets. It felt good watching professionals execute a plan with precision. No drama, no emotion, just business getting handled the way business should be handled. The phone call started around 10 a.m. First was Calvin, and he was screaming. Not talking loudly. Actual full-volume screaming about how I was destroying his family over nothing, how I was being petty and vindictive, how this was going to ruin everything they'd built. I let him vent for about 30 seconds while I sipped my coffee and checked my email, then calmly interrupted him. Calvin, market rate for your house is actually $2,400 a month. I'm being generous by only charging $2,200. You're still getting a family discount, just a smaller one. You can take it or leave it. He sputtered something about not being able to afford it, about having 3 kids and a mortgage. Except he didn't have a mortgage. He had a landlord. Me. And the landlord was adjusting rent to reflect actual market conditions. Where else are we supposed to go? He demanded. That's not my problem. You've got 30 days to decide. Pay the new rate or move out. Your choice. He took it, obviously. Where else was he going to find a 4-bedroom in that school district for that price? Comparable houses were renting for hundreds more, and he'd have to come up with security deposits and moving costs. He was trapped by his own financial mismanagement, and my generosity had been the only thing keeping him afloat. My mother called next, crying and saying I was breaking her heart. Full waterworks, sobbing about how she never thought her own son would do this to his parents, about how disappointed my late grandmother would be, about how family was supposed to take care of family. I reminded her she'd watched her granddaughter insult my wife at a family dinner, and said absolutely nothing. 0 words of correction, 0 acknowledgement that it was wrong. 0 defense of a daughter-in-law who'd done nothing but try to fit in for 3 years. She claimed she hadn't heard it clearly, said the room was noisy, said she was focused on the food, said she couldn't be expected to monitor every teenage comment. All lies that we both knew were lies. You heard it, Mom. You all heard it. You just didn't care enough to say anything. I hung up while she was mid-sob. My father called an hour later, trying the authoritative parent voice he'd used on me my whole childhood. The stern, disappointed tone that used to make me want to fix whatever I'd done wrong and earn back his approval. Told me I was being childish and needed to reconsider this rash decision, that we could sit down like adults and work something out that was fair to everyone. I've already been fair, Dad. I've been more than fair for 5 years. You've lived rent-free in a house I bought with my money while Calvin paid half of market rate and Uncle Howard paid even less. The only thing changing now is that you're all going to pay what everyone else pays. He tried arguing that family was different, that you don't treat family like business transactions, that there should be some loyalty and consideration for the people who raised me. I told him I'd reconsidered plenty. Specifically, I'd reconsidered subsidizing the housing of people who didn't respect my marriage. He could either work out a mortgage with the bank or find somewhere else to live. Those were his options, and they weren't changing no matter how many guilt trips he tried. You're making a huge mistake, he said, voice hard. The only mistake I made was thinking you'd ever see Sophie as family. I hung up. Uncle Howard called around noon and was actually apologetic, which caught me off guard. Said he understood why I was angry. Said he'd been meaning to say something at the dinner, but didn't want to cause drama in front of everyone. Claimed he'd planned to pull Calvin aside afterward and talk to him about how they'd treated us. I appreciated the honesty, but told him the rent increase was staying. Truth was, Howard could afford it if he cut back on the toys he'd accumulated over the years. The boat he never used sat in his driveway under a tarp 11 months a year. The RV they'd taken on 2 trips in 5 years. The motorcycle that mostly just leaked oil on the driveway. He had plenty of discretionary income. He just didn't want to redirect it toward actually paying fair rent. I get it, he said quietly. We screwed up. Kelly and I both saw what was happening and should have spoken up. Yeah, you should have. For what it's worth, we both like Sophie. She's good people. Then maybe act like it next time. We ended the call on decent terms, but the rent increase stood. Brandon called last and was surprisingly supportive. Said what happened at dinner was terrible, and he didn't blame me one bit for doing what I did. He'd been uncomfortable the whole time watching Sophie and me get segregated to the hallway table, but he was just a cousin trying to finish school, and didn't feel like he had the standing to call out his aunt and uncle. I told him his rent wasn't changing. He'd always been respectful and decent, paid on time, took care of the property, and never once made Sophie feel unwelcome. I was happy to keep helping him finish his engineering degree with below-market rent, because he'd earned it by being an actual decent human being. He actually offered to pay more, said it didn't feel right getting special treatment when everyone else was losing it. You're not getting special treatment, I told him. You're getting rewarded for basic human decency. The fact that seems special says everything about the rest of this family. He laughed at that, said he'd keep his head down and finish school. I told him to come over for dinner sometime. Sophie would enjoy cooking for someone who actually appreciated her. The family group chat exploded. I muted it and didn't read any of the messages. 3 days later, Patricia showed up at my office. She'd clearly been crying, makeup smeared, looking nothing like her usual put-together self. Can we talk? She asked. I let her in. She sat down and immediately started with the apologies. She was so sorry. They'd raised Brittany better than that. It was just teenage attitude. They never meant for things to go this far. Do you know what this is going to do to us financially? She asked. We can't afford an extra $800 a month. Calvin's job doesn't pay that much. I pointed out they'd just spent several $1,000s redecorating a house they didn't own and planning a Sweet 16 party. Clearly, they had some discretionary income. She started crying harder. That was savings. We were saving for Brittany's party. She's only going to be 16 once. And Sophie's only going to be insulted at family dinner once. Or at least, she better be. Patricia tried a different angle. What can we do to make this right? Brittany will apologize, we all will. Just please don't do this to us. It's already done, I said. The notices have been sent. The contracts are updated. You can either pay the new rate or move. Where are we supposed to find $800 extra a month? I don't know, Patricia. Maybe Calvin can ask for a raise. Maybe you could get a job. Maybe you could cut back on the redecorating and expensive birthday parties. That's not my problem. She left crying. 2 weeks later, I got a letter from an attorney representing my parents. They were suing me for elder abuse and claiming I'd promised them the house. The case got laughed out of court when I showed the deed with my name on it and bank records showing I'd paid for it in full. Their attorney actually apologized to me afterward, said he'd told my parents they had no case, but they'd insisted on filing anyway. Calvin and Patricia started paying the new rent, but they were clearly struggling. I heard through Brandon that they'd canceled Brittany's Sweet 16 party and put the boat up for sale. Patricia got a part-time job at a medical office doing reception work. Uncle Howard and Aunt Kelly paid the increased rent for 2 months, then moved to a cheaper duplex across town. No hard feelings. They genuinely couldn't afford it on disability income, and I understood that. I wrote them a nice reference letter for their new landlord. My parents ended up working out a mortgage with the bank, but at current market rates, instead of the sweetheart deal they would have gotten years ago when they actually owned the house. Their monthly payment nearly doubled. Dad had to unretire and take a part-time job at a hardware store. The family stopped inviting us to things, which was exactly what I wanted. No more awkward dinners, no more subtle comments, no more pretending everything was fine. Brandon still came over for dinner sometimes. He was good people, and Sophie liked him. He apologized about 10 times for not speaking up more forcefully at the dinner. I told him not to worry about it. He was just a renter trying to finish school, not his job to police his aunt and uncle's behavior. About 3 months after the dinner incident, I got a text from Brittany, a long, rambling apology about how she'd been young and stupid and influenced by her parents' attitudes. She'd started volunteering at a community center with immigrant families and realized how ignorant she'd been. I appreciated the apology, but I didn't respond. Some lessons need to stick. 6 months later, Calvin called. Not yelling this time, actually humble. Said he wanted to apologize, that he'd been thinking a lot about what happened, and realized they'd been wrong. I get it now, he said. We treated Sophie like garbage, and you were right to be angry. I wasn't angry, I corrected him. I was done. Fair enough. Is there any way we can, I don't know, fix this? You can start by treating my wife with respect when you see her in public. You can stop making assumptions about people based on where they're from. You can teach your kids better. We're trying. Patricia's been working with Brittany on cultural sensitivity stuff. Good. Is the rent ever going to go back down? No, he sighed. I figured, but I had to ask. We're not close anymore. Family gatherings don't include us, which suits me fine. My parents and I have a cordial but distant relationship. We exchange holiday cards. I make sure they're not literally homeless, but the warmth is gone. Sophie handles it all with the same grace she shows everything else. Says she's dealt with worse racism from patients' families who refuse to let her treat them because of how she looks. At least my family's bigotry came with consequences. The real win was watching my wife realize she didn't have to tolerate disrespect just to keep peace with people who didn't respect her anyway. She'd been biting her tongue for 3 years, trying to win over my family, and in one dinner, she got permission to stop trying. These days, we spend holidays with her family, either flying to Manila or hosting them here. Her parents are warm, welcoming, and treat me like their own son despite the cultural differences. Her siblings video call every week just to chat. That's what actual family looks like. Last month, we closed on another rental property, a nice duplex near the university. Sophie suggested we rent it to international students at fair rates, give them a good landing spot when they're new to the country. We're working with the International Student Office to make it happen. My real estate portfolio is doing better than ever. Turns out running a business based on actual market rates instead of family favor pricing is more profitable. Who knew? Patricia occasionally posts passive-aggressive things on social media about family loyalty and forgiveness. I have her muted, but Brandon screenshots the good ones and sends them to me. We get a laugh out of it. Brittany graduated high school last month. I sent a card with a $50 gift card to a bookstore. Small gesture, but it felt right. She's apparently going to community college and majoring in social work. Patricia complained about it in the family group chat, which I still have muted, but Brandon keeps me updated. Said she wished Brittany would do something more respectable like business or nursing. Some people never learn. The lesson I took from all this: you can't buy respect with generosity. You can subsidize someone's housing costs, help them out financially, go above and beyond trying to keep the peace, and they'll still treat you like garbage if they've decided you're not worth their respect. But you can absolutely charge market rates to people who don't appreciate the discount. And that's almost as satisfying as actual respect. Sophie's still a night shift ICU nurse, still saving lives, still dealing with difficult people with more grace than they deserve. I'm still buying properties, still fixing them up, still building something that's actually mine. And my family? They're still paying their rent on time, because they know what happens when they don't. Some people called me petty. Maybe I am, but I prefer to think of it as setting boundaries with financial consequences. You don't get to insult my wife and still benefit from my generosity. That's not how this works. The properties I own are doing well. The tenants who respect the arrangement get fair treatment. The ones who learned the hard way are still learning. And Sophie and I? We're building a life surrounded by people who actually value us. Her family, our friends, the international students who are grateful for a landlord who treats them fairly instead of trying to exploit their vulnerability. That's worth more than any family dinner at the core family table. Last week, my dad called and asked if we might consider coming to Calvin's birthday dinner next month. Said they'd really like to have us there, that it wouldn't be the same without us. I asked if Sophie would be seated at the main table. Long pause. Of course, he said finally. I'll think about it, I told him. I probably won't go. Some bridges are better left burned, but it was nice to be asked properly. If you enjoyed this video, please hit that subscribe button. It really helps the channel and help us bring you more and better stories. Thanks.